Asymmetrical shortcuts for bold women over 60. You notice it in a photo first. One side of your hair feels fresh, the other, just there. Balanced, yes, but maybe too balanced. You've adjusted, you've simplified, and now you get to choose styles that reflect exactly where you are, not where you've been. Today, we're talking about asymmetrical shortcuts, a look that's sculpted but not severe, playful but purposeful, the kind of cut that doesn't shout but still turns heads. If you've ever thought, can I still pull that off? The answer might surprise you. At Elder Insights, we love sharing grounded, smart beauty choices that evolve with you. Tap the like button if you've ever stood in front of the mirror and felt ready for something quietly daring. Because in just a moment, we'll look at what makes asymmetry such a flattering choice, especially after 60. That brings us to something many of us grew used to without even noticing, the safety of perfect symmetry. We were told for decades that balance equals beauty, that a cut should match side to side, front to back. It once made sense. It felt neat, dependable, even graceful, especially in our 40s and 50s, when consistency often gave us a sense of control. But after 60, things shift. Our faces soften, our hair texture changes, and that old idea of balance can suddenly feel heavy. Symmetry starts working against us, flattening volume, drawing attention to drooping jawlines, or simply making everything feel static. You probably never thought twice about it. That tidy bob you've had for years felt polished, easy. But if it's starting to feel rigid or worse, invisible, it might be time to let go of that mirror image mindset. Here's what makes an asymmetrical cut such a quiet game changer. It creates visual lift. That little difference in length, maybe a longer swoop on one side or a soft undercut on the other, pulls the eye upward. It adds interest around the cheekbones, opens up the neckline, and gives the whole face movement. Even thinning hair appears fuller because the eye doesn't rest in one place. And no, this doesn't mean going edgy or extreme. Think subtle angle, a tapered neckline, a sweep of fringe that skims just one eyebrow. These small shifts add personality without demanding attention. If you're practical by nature, this may feel easier than expected. You don't have to style it differently every day. In fact, most asymmetrical cuts are designed to fall into place naturally, with a little help from your fingers and a quick spritz of product. It's about stepping out of the even equals elegant box, about choosing shape over strictness. You don't owe consistency to a version of yourself that no longer fits. Because here's the truth. Symmetry can feel safe, but asymmetry, that's where confidence lives. So let's take a breath before we move into something a little softer, but just as impactful. Let's stay with the idea of subtle boldness and look at the power of an uneven part. For years, many of us were told to center everything, our furniture, our lipstick, even our hair. A clean middle part was considered timeless, classic, appropriate. And for some, it still is. But if your goal now is to soften your look or reawaken your features, that tidy line down the middle may be doing the opposite. Here's why. A center part divides the face evenly, which can unintentionally emphasize symmetry loss. If you've noticed a slight sag on one side, or that your features feel less defined than they used to, you're not imagining it. It's natural. Aging gracefully means understanding those changes, not covering them up or pretending they're not there. A sharp middle part can actually draw attention to uneven skin texture, thinning brows, or a changing jawline. And while none of those things are flaws, they're just life, they can feel more pronounced when we hold on to styles that no longer support us. You probably never questioned it. Maybe you've worn your part the same way for 20 or even 30 years. It once felt youthful, put together, easy, but now? That old routine might be muting the features you want to highlight most. The fix is refreshingly simple. Shift the part, even slightly. A deep side part, especially paired with an asymmetrical cut, can create instant lift. It brings softness to one side of the face, adds body to fine hair, and draws attention upward. This tiny change creates a flattering cascade that balances volume and creates dimension without any added effort. Think of it like placing a scarf at an angle instead of square on your neck. It just moves better. And here's something else. An off-center part doesn't need to be precise. In fact, it works best when it's a bit relaxed, like it found its place naturally. That lived-in feel is often more youthful than trying to keep everything in place. If you wear glasses, a side part can also help frame the eyes in a way that draws attention to your expression, not just your frames. And if you wear hearing aids, this kind of cut gives you flexibility, letting one side stay tucked, while the other provides coverage or softness. We were taught that structure was flattering, but freedom, especially the freedom to move things just a bit off-center, can feel surprisingly elegant. So if your hair still parts down the middle because that's just how it's always been, maybe it's time to experiment. Not to chase youth, but to express who you are now. Because sometimes the most powerful shift is just a few fingers to the left. Let's keep going, because what's coming next might surprise you, especially if you've been avoiding short layers. Let's keep going with what we tend to avoid and talk about short, choppy layers. For many women, especially after 60, the word choppy brings up hesitation. It sounds messy, dramatic, maybe even a little too youthful, something better suited for your granddaughter than your own reflection. But here's the gentle twist. Done right, short layers don't scream for attention. They whisper movement, and they might be exactly what your hair needs. As we age, hair often becomes finer, flatter, and more delicate. The thickness we once relied on, whether natural or styled, may no longer be there. And when hair is cut bluntly, without variation, it can sit too close to the scalp, exaggerating the very thinness we'd prefer to soften. That's why sharp, heavy lines can feel so unforgiving. They press everything down. But layers, especially short, well-placed ones, do the opposite. They lift, they create space, they let the air in. You probably kept longer, uniform layers because they felt safe. They didn't require much thought. A quick brush through and out the door. And for decades, they served you. But if your current cut feels like it's just hanging there, limp and lifeless, it might be time to let texture do the talking. Here's what choppy layers really mean after 60. Movement at the crown, softness at the edges, and energy in the silhouette. These aren't chaotic spikes or edgy chunks. They're light taps of volume where you need them most, around the temples, near the eyes, above the jawline. If you've ever caught your reflection and thought, why does everything feel so flat? This could be why. A good stylist can work with your hair's natural pattern, adding subtle short layers that boost body without overexposing thinning areas. This approach is especially helpful for women with straight or slightly wavy hair, where structure often disappears with length. And the beauty of these cuts? They grow out gracefully. No harsh lines, no awkward in-between stages. Just a soft shift over time. Still flattering, still you. It's a quiet change, but a powerful one. Like opening a window in a stuffy room. So if you've always avoided short layers because they felt too bold, maybe now's the time to rethink boldness. Because bold doesn't have to mean loud. Sometimes it just means alive. Let's turn towards something a bit more structured, because yes, even a bold cut can play well with polish. Now, let's talk about something that might feel counterintuitive, embracing sharp angles in your cut. We tend to associate aging gracefully with softness, soft fabrics, soft makeup, soft silhouettes. And that can be lovely. But when it comes to hair, too much softness, especially around the face, can sometimes blur your natural strength. You've lived enough life to have opinions, direction, clarity, and sometimes your haircut should reflect that. A gentle yet defined angle, whether it's a diagonal edge at the jaw or a strong side sweep of fringe, can do wonders for expressing quiet authority. Here's why it matters now more than ever. As our skin loses elasticity and our face shape shifts, we often search for ways to lift without surgery or heavy makeup. Angled cuts do that visually. They add structure back in. A longer front piece tapering back into a cropped nape draws the eye upward and forward. It's geometry that flatters without you ever needing to think about it. You might have shied away from sharp lines before because they felt too harsh. And that makes sense. In your 30s or 40s, angles could read as severe. But after 60, something shifts. that same angle can bring focus and elegance, especially when softened with texture or paired with natural color. Many women stick to rounded shapes out of comfort. It's what we were taught, that round is gentle, feminine, forgiving. And at one point, it was. But if your current style feels too rounded, too undefined, it might be unintentionally erasing your natural bone structure. And here's the quiet truth. Angular cuts don't need to be edgy. They just need to be intentional. Try a cut where one side is slightly longer, curving down toward the collarbone, while the other side brushes just past the cheek. Or a stacked back that tapers upward to reveal the neck and elongate your frame. These small architectural details give your style purpose. If you're someone who likes clean lines in your clothing or home, this might feel more familiar than you expect. It's structure, not stiffness. It's clarity, not conformity. And best of all, angled cuts are incredibly low maintenance. They grow out in a way that still feels intentional, never messy. You don't need perfect styling or fancy tools. Just a bit of texture product, maybe a flick with your fingers, and you're out the door. So if your current cut feels like it's softening you too much, consider bringing back a little definition. Not to fight age, but to honor the shape you've earned. Next, let's explore something that might sound simple, but holds unexpected power. How the neckline of your haircut changes everything. Let's shift our attention downward for a moment to the neckline of your haircut. It's one of the most overlooked parts of any style. We focus on what frames the face, what falls across the forehead, what layers sweep the cheek. But the back of your head, that's often treated like an afterthought. And yet it has a bigger impact than most people realize. After 60, the neckline becomes more important, not less. That's because this area, right at the base of your skull, begins to lose some natural volume. Hair here can grow slower, lay flatter, or grow in different directions. And if it's left too long, too bulky, or too blunt, it can weigh your whole look down. You probably kept it simple for years, one length all the way around. Maybe it felt tidy or easy to manage. Maybe you were told that longer in the back would balance the face. But here's the quiet truth. Too much length at the neck can actually shorten your silhouette. It pulls the eye down, and it can create the illusion of a heavier neckline, even when you're trying to keep things light. Instead, a cropped, shaped neckline can do the opposite. It lifts everything. Think of it like tailoring at the back of a jacket. When it fits just right, your posture feels different. A stacked nape, for example, can create lift at the crown and softness at the edges. A tapered neckline slightly curved inward helps elongate the neck and adds polish without looking fussy. And for women with thinning hair at the back, this kind of structure gives the illusion of fullness, even with very little effort. You don't need to go extreme. Even a subtle cleanup around the neckline can modernize your whole style. If you wear collared tops, scarves, or jewelry that sits high, a neat neckline keeps everything from feeling cluttered. And if you've ever noticed your cut looking off from the back in photos, this might be why. Why do so many women skip this detail? Because we were never told to look behind us. We were taught to focus forward, face first, fringe first, front first. But beauty at this stage is 360 degrees. It's how you feel from every angle. So if you've been feeling like something is dragging your cut down, even when the front feels fresh, take a closer look at the neckline. You might find that one quiet adjustment shifts the whole balance. Let's take one more turn, this time towards something many women still avoid: texture and wave. Yes, even in asymmetry, there's room to soften the edges. And now let's loosen things up a little by letting your natural texture lead the way. If you spent years smoothing, flattening, curling, or reshaping your hair every morning, this might feel unfamiliar. Many of us were taught that tidy meant straight, that neat meant controlled, that softness had to be styled into place. But after 60, your hair starts speaking for itself. Maybe it's developed a gentle wave. Maybe the texture feels finer or more wiry. Maybe it changes with the seasons. And instead of fighting it, you might find that your most flattering cut is the one that finally listens. Asymmetrical cuts pair beautifully with natural movement. That's because their very design embraces imbalance, not chaos, but flow. A bit of bend in the longer side or a soft flick near the jawline adds personality. It breaks up harsh lines and adds lightness around the face. If you've been avoiding texture because it once felt unruly, you're not alone. We were trained to tame hair, and for decades, you might have done just that, with hot rollers, irons, products, salon treatments. That ritual became part of the routine, part of what it meant to feel put together. But here's a quiet revelation. The less you fight your texture, the more modern and more your cut becomes. If your hair has a bit of wave or curl, ask your stylist to cut into it, not against it. They can shape the asymmetry to follow the curl pattern, making sure the longer pieces fall with intention, not tension. This approach lets your natural texture breathe and makes daily styling feel lighter, even optional. And for straight hair, slight razoring or soft point cutting can create airiness, so your strands don't sit heavy or stiff. Even the tiniest bit of lift at the root or a flipped-out end on one side can bring life back into a look you thought was done. If you've spent the last few decades controlling your hair, this part might feel like letting go. And that can be uncomfortable at first. But it can also be freeing. You don't need perfect waves. You don't need volume mousse or 3 types of heat tools. Sometimes you just need to let the shape do the work and trust your hair to show up as it is. Because at this stage, confidence isn't about perfection, it's about permission. Permission to wear what works now, not what used to. Let's wrap this up with a few final thoughts, because asymmetry, as bold as it seems, isn't about being someone new. It's about finally seeing yourself clearly from every angle. So where does all of this leave you? Not with a makeover, not with a dramatic reinvention, but with a quiet shift, one that gives you back something you may not have realized was missing. Shape, ease, and a little spark of edge. Because an asymmetrical shortcut isn't about standing out. It's about stepping into balance. Not symmetry, but harmony. One side longer, one side lighter. One moment structured, the next soft. It reflects exactly where you are now. Experienced, expressive, and fully yourself. You're not fixing anything. You're fine-tuning what already works. If a blunt bob or tidy trim no longer feels right, you're not being difficult. You're being honest. And honest hair always looks better, especially after 60. Maybe it starts with a shifted part, or a layered neckline, or a decision to stop flattening and start listening to the hair you actually have. Wherever you begin, let it feel like you, not who you used to be, not who someone else says you should be, just you, right now, with a little more movement, a little more shape, and a style that turns heads softly. If this video helped bring you one step closer to that moment in the mirror where you recognize yourself again, click like and consider subscribing to Elder Insights. We talk about beauty here in a way that feels real, because you deserve advice that grows with you. Until next time, here's to making every angle feel like home.